And welcome. Good evening. Tonight, we are so proud to bring you the ASQ Innovation Technical Community Speaker of the Month, our own Innovation TC Chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott. You are in for a treat, folks, because she has an innovation pedigree like you would not believe. Quality, innovation, change management, tying it all together, leading Lean Six Sigma programs, leading a corporate innovation program, certified as a Black Belt, as a CMQOE, as a coach, a Scrum Master, and also steeped in ProSci as a practitioner. Again, she is our chair of the ASQ Innovation Technical Community for this year, the principal owner of Rethought LLC, and a manager for IT technical training for Tennessee Valley Authority. Please give a warm welcome to our wonderful speaker tonight. Again, our chair, Miss Rebecca Mott.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for that warm welcome. So today, I want this to be more of a conversation on how we innovate, engage, and help our companies, our communities, our uh, our groups, what have you, engage, innovate, and create. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Um, I see in the chat, I am setting up a new system and need tips on new rules for use that help morale. Mm, Boy, do I have some advice for you instead of reducing enthusiasm on a new system. So that's a little bit of change management, a little bit of leadership, and a little bit of employee engagement and what it takes to pull all those things together. As Dr. Rhonda introduced me and she talked about my experience, it does run deep with understanding how to engage teams to promote continuous improvement, to problem solve, to engage change, and to innovate. And today I want to share with you some advice that I have gathered along the way, talk a little bit about my experience. But I want you to drop in the chat if you have any questions. I'll be popping in and out of the chat. Again, I want this to be more of a conversation and looking at these building blocks for innovation, employee engagement, and change, and how we embrace change. The first thing I want to talk about in terms of building that innovation culture is understanding how to foster that employee engagement and innovation. And what do we need to pay attention to in order to foster that employee engagement and innovation? First, we've got to understand that when we are looking at engaging our employees, our team members in creating the environment where ideas can flourish and people feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, we've got to start with aligning to values. So I want to ask you a question. Have you looked at the corporate values, your company's values, your club's values, your team's values, and how those values tie to the customer, the people that you're serving, your market that you're serving, the social value that it brings, your product or service in the market, and tying that to the values of the work that your individual contributors do. We a lot of times focus on what needs to be done. So we have project management, or if you're using agile to manage projects, whichever method you're using, A lot of it is focused on the tasks that need to be done, the plan, the strategy, the outcomes, the deliverables, and we talk about all of these tactical things that have to be accomplished to reach our end goal. A lot of times, what we miss is defining the values. Again, what value are we creating in the marketplace, and how does that tie to the work that we're doing? How does the work that we're doing support our larger team that we might be playing on if you're in a corporate structure? And how does what your team, the work that they're doing, create maybe even some socioeconomic value in the marketplace? So it's not all about the profit and the revenue that you're generating, but also that social and economic value and maybe some of those intangibles that you're creating in the marketplace. So tying those to the work the individual workers are doing gives them a sense of a larger purpose. And then when we do that, it opens the doorway to the next big topic, which is communication. So, first, we define our values. We make sure that we do have those values in front of us and we know what kind of value we're creating with our product or service in the marketplace, including those intangibles, and how those tie in to the outcomes and the deliverables of the work being done at the individual worker level. But we also want to open the communication. And this starts with creating psychological safety where people, individuals feel safe in sharing their ideas and critical feedback. We've got to make it okay to disagree and to express those opposing views. We also want to positively acknowledge those who are brave enough to step forward and have the courage to say what others aren't willing to say, like acknowledging the elephant in the room. And being open and receptive to even that critical feedback that we receive without getting defensive. So, setting up a culture where people feel safe in expressing differing views and opinions is critical. So, you in the chat, we had a question about morale and how do we make sure that the morale um, stays high when we are engaged in any type of change, rolling out a new product or service or a new system, as was referenced in the chat. Creating that psychological safety in conversations. I'm going to talk a little bit about later what it takes to create that psychological safety. So just hang on if you want to understand exactly what you need to do. One of the third building blocks in fostering employee engagement and innovation is making sure that we are empowering our employees and trusting them to make decisions and take ownership of their work. So the question I have is how much autonomy from day to day do your individual contributors have in terms of how they manage their work? Do you allow those individual contributors to have a say in their projects and processes? Again, creating that psychological safety helps here so that they feel comfortable in challenging the status quo. There may be a process in place that is not working like it should, or there may be risks to your project that you don't see as a project manager, as a team lead, as a manager, supervisor, and you want your folks to surface those things. So you've got to create that psychological safety. but you also have to provide them with opportunities for professional growth and skill development along with that autonomy so that you increase your confidence in their competence and their ability to make good decisions. And the last piece I want to talk about when it comes to fostering employee engagement and innovation may seem a little different from these other things. So we've talked about defining values, opening the lines of communication by creating psychological safety, uh, empowering and trusting our teams to make those decisions and to manage their work. But we also have to create a sense of inclusion and belonging. Again, when you're looking at those values, that's where it starts. But you have to make people feel like they are part of the bigger team and connect what they do to the customer and uh, their own goals for success. And it also helps that if you make space for people to get to know one another, and we know how challenging that is in today's environment where a lot of us are doing things virtually. But setting up even water cooler time on the calendar, think about it. There are no more hallway conversations or water cooler conversations, if you would, where we uh, are able to connect with one another on a more personal level. So, putting that time on the calendar for your teams to drop in and drop out as they would just to have those casual conversations. But we have to create an environment where people, even if they feel different from others, they feel like they belong. And that is a crucial part of it, fostering that employee engagement and innovation. So that is the first piece I wanted to cover in this session. And again, I have more to share, but one of the things that I would like to share right now is a story about how I took a team and we were implementing some improvements to the service line that would significantly reduce the turnaround time or the cycle time in the process. And one of the things that I recognized was that a lot of the folks doing the work didn't understand how the data that they were generating that went into our product, our service we were providing to our customers, didn't understand how it all connected and the value that the customers were getting from it. And so something as simple as sharing customer feedback with the teams was incredibly transformative to opening people's understanding of what they did at the individual level, how it mattered to the end product or service that we were producing. So when I had a compliments board, and just at the time, this was when we were on paper. We're in a digital world now, so we might have to get more creative with it. But creating that board and anonymous with the customer's name, but just quotes from the customer. I appreciate the service. This service helped me this way. And taking those quotes and sharing them back with the team so that they feel connected and a sense of purpose with the work that they do. So that's just one simple tip that I have. And I am going to ask Rhonda if I am. Okay, here. I'm trying to get back to the window here to look at our chat.
Yep, here we go. So let's just say, I'm building the QMS for the company I work for, and because it is new to everyone, it's getting a little hard to get everyone on board. What do you advise?
Absolutely. So starting with, again, connecting this rollout of your QMS to the company values. Is there a strategic priority or a company value that you can tie this QMS that you're rolling out to that, right? And then explaining the why behind it and tying it down to the work that the individuals do and showing why it matters. Again, being transparent with the customer feedback piece that I just talked about, because a lot of times it's hard for people who are in the system, in the processes, doing the day-to-day work to understand what the impact is of poor quality to the customer, to the key stakeholder. So you have to be transparent about that. And it's not about uh, calling out specific customers. So I would caution you not to, attach names or attach specifics of who is giving the feedback other than this feedback came from our key stakeholder or this feedback came from our customers and showing it um, in more of a general form, right? You can even roll it up into here are some key themes that we we received this customer feedback, and here are some of the key themes that we saw, and explaining that as the big why behind the change. You have to make people aware of why we are making this change. Why do we need this quality management system? Why are we implementing it right now? Why is it important? And being very explicit and explaining that. So that is the first step on getting everybody on board and painting that vision of what is the value that the QMS will create and tying again back to the customer or the key stakeholder. You want to make sure that the folks that are in the processes that are impacted by the rollout of this quality management system understand that big why. Another thing that we said we were going to talk about in tonight is how to identify the key factors that contribute to a supportive and encouraging workplace culture for innovation. And again, someone referenced earlier in the chat about morale and what are some of those key building blocks when it comes to morale. One of the things that you want to make sure that is present in your culture is collaboration and teamwork. These are essential building blocks to have a workplace culture that is supportive and encouraging. And this comes through team building activities, promoting cross departmental projects, and just fostering a sense of collective achievement and showing what the team is achieving. Sometimes we call out individuals, and that is is appropriate at times, but the message that you need to give is what the team is achieving. So I call it the power of we. And I tell people that you want to create a culture of we over me. And that's gets at the heart of the teamwork and the collaboration that you want to foster. And I'm going to show you at the end of this webinar a high performance team development, some key tips that I've developed for high performance team development. You also want to make sure that you're creating a continuous learning culture and a culture where you're uh, making sure that folks have the capacity to absorb the change that you're rolling out. So, a lot of times we look only at the change that is related to the project that we have. So, as the person dropped in the chat talking about a quality management system that you're responsible for rolling out. But you have to be sensitive to other things that may be going on that may impact these same s- key stakeholders, key people in the process, and being sensitive to the fact that the change that is going on with certain teams, some teams may be experiencing more change than other teams. And as you are looking at how you roll out your quality management system, looking at those contingency type of projects, initiatives that may be running alongside the rollout of your quality management system. And having those, you yourself may have to have some of those cross functional, cross team, cross organizational conversations about how you marry your rollout of the quality management system with some of the other changes that are going on. So you get really into more of organizational change management, uh, as well as individual change management. And I know Rhonda referred to my certification, my ProSci certification. I'm a big fan of their framework. I encourage you to check it out. They have a lot of free resources on their website. Their framework is ADKAR. So I'll walk you through ADKAR really quickly. ADKAR is about creating awareness for change. That's your first step. Have you done your due diligence in communicating that the change is coming? What is changing? What's not changing? And getting people comfortable with that ahead of the change. D is for desire. And so you want to make sure that you are looking at, again, the big why behind the change. Why are we changing? Why is this important? And embedding that in your communications. You also want to make sure that you're equipping people to handle the change. So that goes into knowledge and ability. Do people have the tools and resources they need to be able to embrace this change? What do they need to know? What do they need to understand that they may not know or understand right now? And providing those training opportunities for them to learn ahead of the change and as the change gets underway, providing those tools and resources for them. And then the last part, which I think is really important when you're talking about the sustainability of change, is what kind of reinforcement model do you have? How will you reinforce change? And that is about keeping people on the pathway of adopting the new way of doing things and not reverting to the old way of doing things, because that is where people will go when they get confused, when they don't understand what's going on, when they get stressed, they will fall back to their comfort zone. So again, the reinforcement is it sounds like, oh, you're going to be strict and roll out some rules, and you may need some rules. Governance framework is something that I always recommend, having some type of governance framework to clarify the roles and responsibilities in the new process, but also uh, just tools and resources for people to go to help them understand how they get unstuck if they or get stuck along the way, or quick resources for them to grab, like a FAQ document if they have certain questions that pop up, so that they don't revert back to the old way of doing things, which is something that we just do as humans. Change is hard. Um, and so the last piece of this, and I know, how are we on time, Dr. Rhonda?
You are doing perfect. We have until the top of the hour for your engagement and phenomenal recipe for best success for innovation and engagement.
Fantastic. So one of the things I wanted to also talk about are how we create a learning strategy for creating a culture of innovation, and some group decision making, change management, group improvisation. Some of these topics I'll hit really quickly, and ask you to go and look at some resources on some of these topics, and I'll give you some resources here toward the end of this session. But one of the things that uh, ensues anytime that we roll out a new system, a new process, we're making improvements to the way we do things. We've got to understand what decisions need to be made and how we are making those decisions. First of all, we need to encourage, again, those diverse perspectives and fostering an environment of psychological safety where those diverse viewpoints are valued and encouraged. Using multidisciplinary teams, cross-functional teams, to promote that diversity of thought, getting people together that have different backgrounds and experiences. Now, I will mention here with the group decision making, and again, I'll point you to a resource that will help you with this. But with those diverse perspectives, a lot of times come difficult conversations. And so I recommend, if you are embarking on a major change, that you have someone on your team that has some strong facilitation skills to facilitate these difficult conversations. You don't want to discourage people from coming forward and identifying risks to your project. We know that from data collected over decades that most projects fail to achieve all of their outcomes, to stay on schedule and under budget. This is most projects. And so, how do we change that dynamic? We have got to have folks on our teams that identify those risks and help us come up with those risk mitigation strategies that keep us from having the positive outcomes for our projects. You also want to make sure that those decision-making processes are defined and they're clear. For have you defined the key decision points in your processes and created decision models for each of those? How will we make those decisions? Who will make those decisions? Who is responsible for making those decisions? And again, having a clear governance framework for this, a RACI model for those quality improvement professionals who are on the line, having a RACI matrix is a must have here so that we are clear on who's accountable, who's responsible, down to the decision making in those processes, not just the deliverables. And then we want to promote active listening. So this is something again that goes back to the facilitation, again, making that psychologically safe environment, helping the team to embrace constructive debate, navigating that conflict within the group to allow those different ideas and perspectives to emerge, but bringing it back together so that we diverge and then we converge to create an agreement that we can all live with. And one of the resources that I'll point you to, he calls it a sustainable agreement. So once we leave the room, we all agree eh, on the outcomes from the meeting or from the decision that we all made together. And so you want to use decision making tools uh, like SWOT analysis, brainstorming techniques, multi voting. And again, I'll point you to some tools that will help you there. You also want to look at the change management. So I walked you through the ADKAR framework. That's one piece of it. You need to clearly communicate the need for the change. I've already talked about that. And you need to involve the employees in the change process. Where in the process can you give them a voice and the power to make a decision for certain things? A lot of times we don't look at that. We come up with the strategy, we come up with the tactical plan, we create our project plan, our milestones, and we just go straight to execution. And the resources that are used in all of that, a lot of times are not consulted. I heard a story today of a leader talking about innovation and change management, and she was saying that she engaged with a team and in engaging with the person on the team, asked that person for their feedback of their idea. And they said, wow, I've been working here a long time and I've never been asked for my ideas or my feedback. And that's a sad commentary for a lot of projects, especially in the execution phase. We don't slow down enough to rethink some of the things that we're doing and to allow folks to, again, give us that critical feedback, tell us what's working, what's not working, and tweak what we're doing so that we have the outcomes that we need for sustainable change. And then leading by example and celebrating small wins. Here again are things that are hallmark when you talk in ways of engaging with your teams. Of course, you want to lead by example, and you want to celebrate along the way. And when we talk about the morale piece of it that was mentioned earlier, if you have leaders who are doing one thing uh, and saying something else, they're not leading by example, it's going to have a huge impact on the morale. And then let's acknowledge change is hard, and we need to celebrate small victories and wins throughout the process. A lot of times in projects, we wait until the end and do a big celebration if we reached all of our milestones and deliverables and brought the project in on time under budget. We do a big celebration at the end. But if you're working in particular an initiative or project that has a long timeline on it, this becomes vitally important. How can we break it down and celebrate along the way as we reach certain milestones, not forgetting to stop, look back, see how far we've come, and celebrate that. And then the last piece is the group improvisation techniques. So this is all about fostering an environment that is creative and playful. And a lot of times we think, "Oh my goodness, we want to be serious. This is serious business, and we want to make sure we're uh, meeting these outcomes." But what the research says is that the teams who are the most playful are also the teams that are the most engaged, that have the highest morale, and that are the most creative. They are the ones who will lean in and take risks, experiment with new ideas because they feel comfortable with one another. Again, going back to that sense of belonging and inclusion. And so you want to make sure that you're fostering that creative and playful environment in your workspaces. So this can be as simple as some team building activities that are not work related. Uh, uh, Bringing in some ways that people could connect naturally and uh, using some humor in the workplace as appropriate. So we want the humor to be appropriate, but can we integrate some humor into the workplace that is respectful, but gives us a chance to just relax and embrace being a real person in the workplace? We also want to make sure we're equipping our folks to, again, handle uh, ambiguity and remaining open to change. And so this is where, again, training may come into play. And you may have to identify some training and embed that. Again, you're rolling out a quality management system and equipping people to embrace this change. There are going to be points in here where they need to be able to adapt quickly to unexpected situations, and how do they manage themselves in that. This is where you can get your human resources professionals, your HR professionals involved in the conversation and identifying some training that may be appropriate throughout your project, the rollout of your initiative, again, that may support. This is the human side of change. And so we're dealing with humans. We want to acknowledge that. And everything is not the tactical project plan. Some of this is supporting the humans in the process. So that also feeds into encouraging experimentation and making it okay to fail. So someone once famously said, failure is not an option. And for some environments, for some industries, uh, we do not want things to fail, right? Because that may be catastrophic. And so we acknowledge that. But where are some spaces and some processes that we can set up where we make it safe to fail and learn, right? And even when we identify a problem, the response to it is very important. How we respond in that moment is vitally important. And if we respond in the wrong ways, we can end up instituting um, a fear into the culture. And once that gets going, it is really difficult to turn it around. But again, how can you equip your team to learn as they go from their failures, come up with those ideas, those risk mitigation strategies that say, okay, we made a mistake. Let's look at the corrective action plan and then let's figure out what can we put into place to prevent this from happening again, and making that part of the conversation rather than uh, looking at who's to blame. That will definitely take your culture in the wrong direction. And so we're headed toward the finish line with what I have to share. We're down to looking at the resources I want to point you to. The first one that I want to talk about is embedded in our community, the ASQ Innovation Technical Community that is sponsoring this webinar today. We have several resources that uh, are provided to you that can help you with your innovation journey. One is our recently published Innovation Body of Knowledge. And in 45 concise pages, it gives you the tools that you need, the strategies that you need to implement innovation in your company. Another resource is authored by people who are part of our ASQ Innovation Technical Community, and that is the Executive Guide to Innovation. And if you are in the C-suite or you are advising the C-suite on how to create an innovative culture, you need this guide. The last resource I would like to point you to has to do with that facilitation that I talked about earlier. So, when you're talking about creating psychological safety and supporting teams in problem solving and engaging them and navigating difficult conversations, you need this resource, and it's called F Notes, written by one of the authors is Tracy Owens, again, who is a member of our community here. And so F Notes, the Innovation Body of Knowledge, and the Executive Guide to Innovation. You need those in your toolkit. Some other resources are um, group decision making model. So Sam Kainer has and company has a body of work that is a result of over 30 years of facilitating community and company kind of problem solving conversations. How do you get a diverse group of folks together and have them co-create a set of recommendations uh, to lead to a sustainable agreement? And so his book, Sam Kaner, Kaner, his book on group decision making is one that I have. It's lovingly falling apart because I use the tools and techniques in that book myself as I engage with teams. If you want to talk about being a better leader in terms of creating a psychologically safe culture, there is nowhere else to go but to Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, and her daring to lead body of work that she's put together. So if you are struggling with how do we create psychological safety and get our leaders on board with that, I encourage you to check out Brene Brown's body of work. You will find tools in the innovation body of knowledge referenced on how to deal with complexity. Uh, we call it VUCA. And so the innovation body of knowledge is one resource. Another resource that will help you connect the dots and map the complexity of the systems that you're dealing with comes out of uh, Cornell University, the Cabreras, the Cabrera Research. They have put together a body of work for systems thinking, and that opens the doors to helping you understand how to map the complexity of any system that you're dealing with. Highly recommended. What else can we do? Well, I would, after hearing what you've heard tonight, look at what are three things that I can take away from tonight's talk to help me to implement an innovative strategy or technique in your workplace culture. We've talked about a lot, looking at tying the individual workers' work, what they're producing in the process, to the values of the customer, the value that you're producing in the marketplace, and making that transparent. We talked about how you might look at the customer, the key stakeholder feedback, and bring that into the view of the people who are being impacted by whatever change you are rolling out, making that transparent as well. We talked about the importance of creating that psychological safety in your culture, looking at where can you start with that. It may be with a conversation on how do we get our leaders to be the example and to get them on board with reaching their folks and explaining the why. So something I didn't talk about that I just thought of is you want to, with the messaging, make sure that each leader is equipped with the messaging. Sometimes we want to message out from, a central place, a corporate, or the team that's responsible for the change does all the messaging. And that, a lot of times, if you're in a matrixed organization, will make it more difficult to get people on board. People trust their leader, the leader that they're working for. And so hearing it from them uh, is is very impactful. So can you equip your leaders with talking points so that they know how to explain the change to their folks and get behind it? Defining your big why again and tying that to the customer value. Can you get a conversation started about what it means to become a vulnerable leader so you can unlock the door to creating a psychologically safe culture? Um, can you promote collaboration? One simple thing that every manager leader can do uh, that is very simple is as you are engaging with your folks and they're working on tasks, ask them this question: who did you work with to get that done? And encouraging your folks to reach out to others as they are engaging in their work, referring them to folks and connecting them with people so that you do create again that cross functional, cross organizational, even within a team, connecting one person's work to the other person's work and get them talking to each other about it. You want to embed specific team activities that unmask the personal side of folks, right? We are real people, and can we bring our whole selves to work and feel included and feel like we belong? You want to use tools in your quality toolkit. So I challenge the quality professionals on the call to go back and look at your quality toolkit and ask yourself, based on what you've heard tonight, what quality toolkits would you pull out of your toolbox to help you with decision making and making processes transparent? And then last, I would invite you to join our innovation technical community here in ASQ and download your copy of the innovation body of knowledge that does have a lot of the information that I covered here on tonight. How much time do we have, Rhonda?
Yes. Thank you so much. We have about 8 minutes left, and we do have a couple questions in the chat. Are you able to take those, Rebecca?
I am.
There is a lady, Cheryl Tolkuff, who mentions that her company's values is embedded up, down, and across her organization. Maybe could you speak to that with how that positively impacts innovation and engagement?
Say that again, Rhonda. I didn't catch
Yes.
the first part.
Yes, she said her company works very hard to embed the company values up, down, and across the organization, and to out actually to their customers as well. So maybe could you speak to that practice, and how that might affect innovation and engagement?
Absolutely. Again, it's about getting people to, so when you talk about employee engagement, it's about creating a sense of purpose. What they're finding in research when it comes to engagement is that people who feel connected to a purpose when they come to work are going to be more engaged. And so again, that is a great practice, right? Taking those values, communicating them up and down, across and out to your customers so that your customers understand what your values are and you see your top performing companies doing just that. They have their values posted on their website. The values are talked about in leadership meetings. The values are talked about in all hands meetings. The values a lot of times are even embedded in the performance review system. So these are all things spot on that you can do, especially in a matrixed organization, to ensure that people are tying those values to the work that they do. Great question.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think the next one is really about uh, the question is, how would you suggest creating an environment where QA leads by example when it may not be the case in other departments? So kind of how do you embed a walking the talk kind of culture?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? And it takes, I think one of the biggest things is, are you sharing those stories that show what excellence looks like? That's the question I would ask you. Are you sharing those stories, right? Are you sharing those stories out to other teams? Uh, how are people really it's about getting people to pay attention to what they're seeing and what they're hearing, right? And specifically calling it out. And that can be done through storytelling. So, giving those examples in different meetings that you're in of what that looks like. And it doesn't have to be done in like a formal way. It can be, as you're talking about a report out for your team on their accomplishments, embedding the stories in there so that you're giving people a, a tangible understanding of what it looks like. What does good look like? What does excellent look like? What does So we talk about these values, right? But then what does that look like in action and sharing those stories?
Thank you. And I think we have one last question, if you would feel, well, two perhaps. Um, both of them are about fun, engaging activities. One asks really for they're specifically saying Asperger's, but maybe we'll raise that up a level to say for neurodivergent populations you might be working with, right? How can you engage them in play? What might have you seen work the most? Whereas I think the point they were making, some may be more introverted than others, and this, right, really makes them potentially uncomfortable. So how do you handle the innovation and fun with your neurodivergent populations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have the magic answer, but I do have a perspective. So I will say that I am not an expert in this area, but I think it's really about making sure that we're engaging people in various methodologies and ways. Unfortunately, a lot of what we do is talk, right? We engage in meetings and we're verbal, we talk. And we don't and I even got into this when I was facilitating meetings and problem solving sessions. How do we make space for everyone to contribute and not just the people who are quick to speak? And so that makes making sure that you have various modes and methodologies to engage folks, right? So I've done it tonight, right? You could come off mute and talk, or you could drop what you're doing in the chat using polling features, right? We all have these tools in the virtual space using polling features. When I did my problem solving sessions in person, it was, the sticky notes, right? We're going to write or even draw a picture of our idea or what we're thinking, right? Before we talk about it, we're going to write about it first, or we're going to draw. I have an activity I used to do called draw the problem. So these are different ways and modes and methodologies that you get everyone. So when you're putting together a meeting, I think thinking about how are the people going to engage and not letting it just rest on talking about it, right? And having it a verbal conversation. But can I use other ways to engage that may be people who might not be likely to speak for whatever reason, they feel comfortable engaging in those other ways, and so just mixing it up. Great question.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think just very quickly, if you could, is could you identify one fun, engaging team activities that QA or other teams could engage in to further this innovation agenda?
Yeah, I would first I'd point you to gamestorming.com, gamestorming.com. Uh, all kinds of activities over there. And it's one that I have in my toolkit that I go to all the time as a continuous improvement, quality improvement professional. One of them I just referenced, draw the problem. So we've got affinity mapping. I hope you've had the chance to use that. So that's one of the gold standard tools. But the other one I had talked about is draw the problem. So I just get index cards, just large index cards. I pass them out blank on both sides, no lines. On one side of the card, in your own words, describe the problem we're facing. And I give them time. And then flip your card over. And on the other side, draw a picture that represents the problem. You're helping them activate two different sides of their thinking. The visual and then, the verbal. So you're getting them to think about this problem they're facing differently. And then I had them paired up. Usually I would pair them up and have them tell their neighbor about what they wrote and what they drew. And so this again makes it very comfortable for people who maybe Asperger's, right? They may not be comfortable in a big group talking about it, but they can talk to one person. And so, and then after we paired people up and they talked about it, then we would come back together as a big group and kind of gather our thoughts. And it was just amazing the connection points that I would see, and everybody that I ever led through that exercise realized one thing, that they had more in common about how they saw this problem than they than differences. I hope that was helpful. What are the barriers that refrain engagement? So how much time do we have left? Are we done, Dr.
We
Rhonda?
are, yes. Do you want to take that? I don't want to cut you off if this is like right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So the barriers that uh keep people from engaging, let's just flip everything I said throughout this call. Don't talk about why you're changing. Just push it out. That would be one to help you fall flat. Don't explain the why, just tell people they have to do it. Um, Not asking people their opinions, their perspective, asking them to contribute, right? People sometimes won't tell you unless you ask. So are you asking? If you don't ask, they may not tell you, and your engagement level will be low. So you have to explicitly give them opportunities to ask and make them feel safe to come forward and ask and challenge. And I think those are the big things. There are others that I talked about during this call, but those are the big things that come to the top of my mind. I appreciate so much your engagement. I intentionally did not have slides because I wanted this to be a conversation and for you to really hear and listen to some of the things that I had in terms of what I think on promoting innovation and employee engagement. And you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm active on my LinkedIn profile. You're welcome to reach out to me there, and I'd be happy to talk to you and engage with you there. And again, an open invitation to join our ASQ Innovation Technical Community. Thank you, Dr. Rhonda, for all you do for the ASQ Innovation Technical Community, including serving as our superb host for these webinars.
Thank you so much again, our chairperson, Rebecca Mott. Thank you so much for a wonderful session engaging with our members around the globe and our communities. Much like our chair said, you'll find information as we send out the deck tonight, how to join ASQ if you're already a member, how to connect with us on My ASQ, a little bit more about our ASQ Excellence Insights on Excellence, and a reminder for you all to join us in our next webinar events with Miss Grace Duffy, Mr. Zubair Anwar, and Ms. Erin Urban on the 22nd of June, the 14th of July, and coming up in the fall. Again, for those who are not aware, Miss Rebecca Mott, again, is our chair, Miss Michelle Vargas, our chair-elect, Miss Jackie Jolly, our secretary, and Mr. Larry Miller. And you have our chair's email address on the screen ahead of you. And again, we wish you an innovation-fueled 2023 and just thank our executive leaders for being here and engaging with all of you. Please join us again in June for our next ASQ Innovation TC webinar. ASQ Innovation TC signing off with a big thanks again to our chair, Miss Rebecca Mott. Good night, everyone.